It's been a while since you've been on, about May. Lots happened since then.
Yes, I've been away in the UK, so I was there on the run-up
For the
to
Brexit.
for the Brexit. I wasn't there for the Brexit, but I just happened to be there at the same time as it was all running. And it was really very interesting, this issue of, does it matter about what the facts are? It's all about feelings. And both sides were sort of saying it's going to be terrible if we leave, it's going to be terrible if we stay in. Things have turned out, it's not been so good deciding to leave. Remember, it's going to be 2 years before they actually leave. And at this point, the Article 50 hasn't been triggered, which is when they start to put things into place ready to leave. But certainly there's been some considerable negative reactions around the place. The bottom's falling out of the market for commercial property in London. The pound's base rate's been cut back to 0.25% from 0.5%, which goes back to that question about, you know, what's left for reserve banks around the world.
Inflation.
Well, that's the problem. There isn't any. And so most of the developed world, reserve banks are cutting rates. In some places they're negative. And our own reserve bank this week is facing up to cutting another quarter. Hopefully they'll do a half, because currency is overvalued right now, which is certainly not bringing a smile to many exporters. But the problem for reserve banks is that the monetary policy that we've all come to love and loathe, I suppose, depending on which side of the fence you sit on, it's basically losing its ability to do very much. You know, you could change when we had interest rates at 6, 7, 8%, you could sort of play around and 1% made a difference. But when it's at 0.5% or 1%, does a quarter really make that much difference? So the efficacy or the weight of monetary policy is sort of losing its way, if you like. And maybe governments one day are going to have to start making government decisions again, rather than blaming it all on the central bank.
Pointing to somebody
That's right.
else. Yeah.
It's not our problem. It's these, you know, we've got an independent central bank and they make the decision. But clearly the currency has lifted from mid-60s, now it's low 70s. That does bring pressure back on to exporters. That brings pressure back on to farming, the primary sector. And things aren't looking too flash in the areas where we make a living.
House prices, that you keep bringing that up.
Well, that's the rock and the hard place. We cut interest rates, that reduces debt servicing, that makes tax-free capital gains on property all the more attractive, and that brings landlords, people with equity, into the market, lifting up prices, freezing out the youngsters coming through who can't get onto the ladder. And I think we saw 13.5% average house price increase in Auckland last year, against a backdrop of wages moving about 1.5%. Well, you don't need to know much about arithmetic under those circumstances to say, I can't save myself into a house. And that actually starts to attack the fabric of what being a New Zealander is, I think. If you don't have that sort of, it's not a quarter acre anymore, it might be a bit smaller, but at least there was that aspiration to be a homeowner for most people.
Where do bonds fit into all this? Because people say when times are tough, you look at bonds.
Well, you think about bonds. What are bonds? They're basically a loan agreement. I give you some paper, you give me some money, and I'm going to pay you a certain coupon rate or an interest rate on that bond. And because the world is really difficult right now, interest rates are very low, we see bond markets starting to lift a bit. This morning in the Herald, New Zealand has the mantle of being the most expensive bond market in the world, which, surprise, surprise, that starts to see money coming here. I think we're running at just under 2%. The US is just over 1%. And good old Switzerland's at minus 0.8%. So you sort of, you know, there's quite a range of policy implications when we talk about those sort of bond rates.
So what else should we be aware of as far as that whole piece of knitting?
Well, I mean, the world's an uncertain place. I think you look at the uncertainty in North America, you look at the uncertainty in the UK, the uncertainty in Europe, and that actually means that it's probably, you know, I think we talked about it 2 or 3 years ago, it may be time to sell the toys and sort of batten down the hatches, because things are going to be a bit tough for a while.